What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Venn Pod. Today, Alex and I are joined by Jonathan Russell and Jeff Anderle of the very famous, very awesome bass clarinet duo SQWONK. And today, we get to pick their brains about all things bass clarinet, the beginnings of their career, graduate school, and the very, very cool, very awesome Bass Clarinet Summer Intensive happening at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. John and Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here. My name's Jeff Anderle, and yeah, I'm obviously half of SQWONK, and I also teach at the SF Conservatory, where the camp will be.
And I'm John. I am also half of SQWONK. Very strange coincidence there. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, outside Boston, and I'm just a freelance composer and performer.
Well, we're so excited to have you guys on the podcast. It's kind of funny. We got the old school duo, like the legends, and then the new duo. So it's a really cool collab because we're the newbies and y'all are the ones we've been looking up to. So like Hannah mentioned, we're going to ask you guys some questions, and we actually had our followers submit some questions for you guys. So let's kick it off. I think the first thing we should talk about is this new and exciting bass clarinet intensive at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. So if you guys just want to talk a little bit about it, like what all it will entail, what it includes, such as like lessons, masterclasses, performances, all that good stuff, who's the faculty, and just give them a little insight to what it is.
Sure, yeah, we're really excited about it. It's something that John and I have wanted to do for a really long time, just to sort of have an opportunity for bass clarinets to get together. And we were also really inspired by the Low Clarinet Fest that just happened back in January, and just seeing the like wonderful community that is the low clarinet world. So this will be a week. I have a lovely flyer here. It's a week in June in San Francisco, and the faculty will be me and John plus my colleague Jerry Seamus, who's the bass clarinetist in the San Francisco Symphony. And so it's pretty, it's pretty a wide variety of sort of abilities and experiences between the three of us. Kind of covers everything you can do as a bass clarinetist. And yeah, it's going to be lessons. Everyone will have a lesson with, I think, all three of us. There's master classes every day, presentations about extended techniques and altissimo and career development and composing and all these different things. And then there will be some large bass clarinet ensemble rehearsals and performances at the end of the week. So yeah, John has this bass clarinet ensemble Improbable Beast, and so we'll be playing some of his repertoire. And yeah, I think some of the people I know that have applied are sort of have played in duos and things like that as well. So there will also be some like coachings of bass clarinet duos and bass clarinet ensembles and stuff that happens as well.
Cool. And question, so is everybody welcomed? High schoolers, college students?
Yeah, it's geared at 18 and up only because staying in the dorm, it's easier if you're over 18, so you don't need a
Mm-hmm.
parent there. But any of 18, and if you're willing to make your own accommodations, then high schoolers are welcome.
And then next question, what are the audition requirements?
hmm It's pretty flexible. We asked for basically a solo piece of your choice plus either a movement from a Bach cello suite or an orchestral excerpt. So
Nice.
sort of just, we just want to kind of get a sense of where your level is. We're trying to be as inclusive as we can.
That's really good. That sounds really exciting. And Hannah and I actually had the opportunity to be at Low ICA, and that was really neat because we went to Clarinet Fest and you see all the clarinets. But it was really neat to see the global community of low clarinets, like just low clarinets, because that's something that we haven't really seen before. So this sounds really exciting.
When Alex and I were first starting out as Venn Duo, your recording of Black was actually one of the first things that I sent her. I was like, Alex, if we're going to be a duo, we have to play Black. Like, we have to do it. And so to see you guys perform it at Low ICA Live was just like such an incredible full circle moment. I was like, oh my gosh, like us as a duo get to watch our favorite duo perform one of like our dream pieces. That was just so cool for us.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that piece is kind of wild in how much of an impact it's had. I was talking with Mark recently. He said the sheet music has sold more than 2,000 times or more than 3,000 times or something crazy like that. Like, because he's also arranged it for more like 10 different instrumentations as well. So it's pretty amazing for us to have been a part of that. And it's also, 9 years in or whatever, it's still a super fun piece to play.
And if I could
15
say,
years, Jeff.
Sorry,
15
I
years.
did my
Yeah.
math wrong, yeah.
2008 it was
That's
composed.
right,
Yeah.
that is, and if I say something, Hannah sent me you guys' recording of Black, and because I watched your recording, I told her we are not doing it because it sounded really hard. I was like, Hannah, no. So we didn't do it.
There's time.
You know,
There's time.
I think one of the things that was really gratifying for us at the Low Clarinet Fest was hearing a lot of stories like what you just said, people coming up to us and saying, it's usually either Black or Toccata and Fugue that they heard, when they were in 6th grade or whatever, and it's why they play bass clarinet. And it's really nice for us to get to meet all these people who had that experience. And in some cases, people, I'd corresponded with over email or Facebook or something, and then to actually meet them in person. That was really fun for us.
Yeah, it's always so crazy, like just seeing people from online to in person, especially after COVID and everything. It's like a lot of the people we do know we haven't met in person.
Yeah.
So.
Totally.
Well, it's kind of crazy for us too, because when we started the group, we were just playing bass clarinet duos because we liked playing with each other and we thought it was a fun and kind of weird, delightful thing to do. So, to have people say like, oh, you were a big influence, like that's not something we ever went into the experience expecting. And so it's kind of like, oh, wow, that's really neat.
So like where in your career timelines did you two meet and decide that you were going to be like bass clarinet friends for life?
Yeah, so I was I finished my master's degree at San Francisco Conservatory in 2003, and this was 2005, and I was teaching music theory and ear training there. And I was walking through the halls one day, and I hear this sound coming from a practice room, and it's somebody playing Smindel Camerto by Evan Zaporin, which is this amazing. It's a transcription of a 3-part Georgian men's choir piece for solo bass clarinet. So there's a lot of singing while you play. So it's a piece I knew and I'd sort of tried to work on, but not very successfully. And I heard someone like kind of rocking it. So I was like, wait a minute, I have to meet that person. So I knocked on the door, and it was Jeff, who had just started his master's degree, I believe, at the conservatory.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a bass clarinet recital scheduled for the following spring. I think this was, I don't know, maybe in December or January when this happened. I'm not exactly sure. But I was having some tendonitis issues at the time, recovering from, and I wasn't sure I could handle a full program. At least this is how I remember it, Jeff. I'm curious if you have the same memory. So I suggested that maybe we could split a recital together. So we each did some solo stuff, and then we came together for a few duos. And that's what was sort of the most fun part for us, was playing some duos together. So that first concert was kind of our proto SQWONK. SQWONK existed, but we didn't know it existed yet.
Yeah. I mean, we even, for that first concert, we were both working on David Lang's press release, but it was like too hard for us at the time. So we like split it up and we each did different sections of it.
That's right. Yeah.
Ways to like you play that note and I'll play the rest of it. Like I can't play that part, but you can. It's like, it's very silly, but at the time it was sort of like, well, I can do the stuff that you can't do and you can do the stuff that I can't do. So it was actually really like a nice way for us to learn and kind of challenge each other at the beginning.
Yeah. And we did this phased version of the Bach G major cello suite where Jeff played it a 16th note behind me, which is fun.
It's really fun. That's
something we used to do that a lot in the early days of SQWONK. Yeah.
Wow. That's kind of funny though, because like especially how you said SQWONK existed before it was a thing. Like that's Hannah and me. Like
Oh, really?
We started doing virtual recordings because, fun fact, although we went to undergrad together, we never played like a live duo together until
Oh, wow.
last year Clarinet Fest, Hannah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
our
Wow.
first performance as
So
a duo.
because the performance we had planned got canceled
COVIDed,
because
yeah.
Of course, yeah.
quarantine. But what had happened was we were doing all these virtual projects, and then one day we were just like, should we be a duo? We're a duo, and we had an Instagram account, and I guess that made it official.
Right,
So
that's all you need.
right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of funny. And I guess maybe that's the story of every group, maybe. It's like you don't know you actually exist. You just happen. So
Yeah, you just happen to exist one day. Well, so John and Jeff, you guys don't live in the same place. So how do you keep SQWONK going? Like, what enables your group to thrive despite you being apart all the time?
It's a challenge for sure. And partly it's a challenge because we started together, and so much of the initial sort of way that SQWONK happened was just lots and lots and lots of rehearsal together, and sort of these really challenging pieces, and the sort of level of detail of intonation and togetherness. That just happened because we spent a lot of time rehearsing. So when John moved away, it has been a challenge to sort of maintain the group, and it's sort of gone in phases of like more or less activity. And now we've kind of settled into, like your favorite classic rock band, where if we're asked to play somewhere, like if we don't play black, people will be pretty upset. So we kind of, at the moment, are sort of mostly playing stuff that we've played before. Like we're not actively commissioning stuff right now. And I mean, every once in a while we'll get a new piece. But yeah, so mostly we're sort of like using the work that we've done in the past to sort of to keep the group alive. And the pandemic didn't help us either in terms of like trying to get new projects started. But basically, when we have a concert, we just make sure we get there a couple days beforehand, so we can refresh all of our repertoire and learn anything new we're going to put together, and then just go into the concerts.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I think that the time that those 4 or 5 years we worked together in San Francisco is really key, because that's kind of where we really built the SQWONK sound, and really like learned to play in tune with each other, and to play together, and learn some of that really, really difficult repertoire, which we still play. And it was, and also, as Jeff was saying, just rehearsing so much at the beginning. And also we would just perform constantly. We would play in bars and cafes and art galleries and wherever anyone would have us. And I think that was also really important to our development.
yeah, I have a question though, because like Hannah and I are also like long distance duo situation.
Yeah.
But do you guys meet up outside of performances? Like if you want to get a specific recording done, like to meet in a studio or anything, or is that all planned during the performance time frame?
It's usually planned all at the same time. Like if we were going to do a recording, we would like add a day before or after another concert or masterclass that we were going to do. And the other group that I play a lot with is this reed quintet, Splinter Reeds. And that group was sort of from the beginning an all distance group. Like all 5 of us live in different places. And so we have a really different approach where basically most of the time we get together and we haven't played any of the music before, but we still only have like 24 hours to put a concert together. But because the group was built that way, we all sort of have the kind of expectation like, okay, when I go into the rehearsal, it needs to be like performance ready at the first rehearsal. I've studied my score, I've done all this work. And that works well. It's also a little easier, I think, with a quintet because there are more places to hide a little bit. But with a duo, it's so stark and pure that like a tiny little mistake, it's like it's just me. Like there's nowhere to hide in like a bassoon multiphonic. Like I either play it or I don't.
I was gonna say you could just blame John, but then John probably gonna be like, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
It's like I know it wasn't you, so it must have been me.
And then a question that we had as well was, obviously you guys have been pretty established as a duo, but what has helped you guys stay relevant?
Ooh, that's a good
Ooh.
question.
I mean, I feel like part of it is that, the bass clarinet as an instrument has really sort of been coming into its own in recent years. And so I feel like, in a way, I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve in that sense. I mean, there are obviously fantastic people who came before us who we were also inspired by. But I feel like since we sort of became established, there's just a lot more interest in the bass clarinet, a lot more people specializing in bass clarinet. Um, so I think that has helped us in the sense that, we created this repertoire, and at the time there weren't a whole lot of other people who were necessarily that interested or playing it, but now there's a lot more people who are looking for bass clarinet duets and interested in it.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, because it's hard, like, especially with being like college students, the way you guys started. A lot of the times people start chamber groups and then they just vanish. So
Yeah.
it's always the question, well, how do we stay relevant, even in today's society of music or classical music, as they describe
Yeah,
it?
I think also I don't know that relevance has ever really been our goal. Like I think for
Hmm.
Squonk, I mean, I guess that's sort of maybe obvious from like, what does the world need? A bass clarinet duo, like, but also I feel like really it's been more about the relationship between me and John, and so I'm always going to seek out opportunities to play music with John, and I've been in other chamber music groups where that I enjoy being in the group, but it's not like I need to be doing this several times a year. And
Yeah,
I
there's go ahead, sorry.
yeah, it's kind of different. Like the goal is not like world fame and riches. It's like I want to be playing this music that I love that's important to me with John and like have these experiences. So, you know, I think even if no one cared, we would still be doing it. And it's just great that the bass clarinet has had this like sort of explosion of interest from a lot of like college age students and, so that has like helped us, but it's not that we were like targeting anything specifically. Like we're always kind of, like I said, we're kind of like shocked and delighted when people like know about us.
Yeah, and I think Jeff and I have this this kind of musical connection, which is very special and rare. I certainly have never had it with anyone else quite the same way in my musical career, in the sense that we'll come together and things that in other groups, even very good groups, would take hours of rehearsal. We just kind of like feel are on the same page off the bat, and tend to feel things very similarly. So yeah, so it's so much fun to play with Jeff that, as Jeff was saying, that's what keeps us coming back, because there's nothing else that can sort of nourish us in the same way that SQWONK nourishes us, I would say.
I
It
love
even
that.
comes down to like when we get a new piece and we're like deciding who
Yeah.
should play which part, it's always very obvious like right away like, oh no, you should be first on that one, or like I should be first on this one. Like we've never had a disagreement about that. And even sometimes we'll play a piece a couple times and be like, I don't think I should be doing this. And it's like, yeah, I didn't think so. And then we switch and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, yeah, there is like a special thing that's happening there.
Wow, that's amazing. That just like makes my heart so happy. And Alex and I feel that as well. I mean, we were like, COVID happened and I knew she was going to Arizona and I was still in Pennsylvania at the time. And now I'm in Texas and she's still in Arizona. But I totally resonate with that. Like, I will always seek out opportunities to play with her. And that's really cool and awesome to hear that, like, your friendship has enabled the group to flourish and to be what it is. That's really encouraging for us and will be for all of our listeners as well. Yeah, that's
And I
Yeah,
awesome.
think we were like musical buddies first, and our friendship kind
yeah,
of grew out of our musical connection, which is I
yeah,
think is interesting.
yeah. And I think,
It,
I one of the classes I teach at SF Conservatory is called Musical Startups, and it's about how to sort of take an idea and turn it into a thing that exists in the world. And, I have a whole class that's basically on the subject of like how to pick the right people for your project. Because if you have the right people, then most challenges are surmountable. You know what I mean? Like you can do a lot if you have the right people because you have the willingness to work hard and you know that they're going to be there to support you. So picking the right people is, 9 times out of 10, that's, I should say, if you don't pick the right people, you will often have challenges and a group will sort of like fizzle out due to sort of lack of interest or some kind of conflict that comes up. So it's really important to sort of like seek out those relationships. And if you find someone that you really gel with musically or interpersonally, then just find something to do with them and see what develops. Because that's what I've seen leads to the most longevity in musical projects.
Can I just say I wish that course was offered at every institution, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges in terms of chamber music, right? Because
Yeah.
like someone asks like how do you stay relevant, right? And if that's not a goal of yours, then how are you going to play with someone who wants to be relevant and you don't really care for that? You kind of just want to have fun and make music. So it's like the goals really do matter, and the like-mindedness really does play a big part into who you collab with. So it's very important.
What advice would you give for being the right kind of people? You said a lot about picking the right kind of people. What would you say to somebody who's wanting to start a chamber opportunity or is wanting to reach out to other people? How do you be the right kind of person to collab with?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well,
he's gonna describe himself.
No, I'm gonna describe John.
Tall, dark black beard.
Yeah.
Plays bass clarinet.
Well, I think a lot of it is, well, I guess there's two parts. I mean, I think part of it is really knowing yourself and knowing your own strengths and weaknesses and sort of knowing what skills you have and what skills you need, so that you know the type of person that you want to work with. And then some of it is just, I don't know, is there a more elegant way to say that just be a good person?
No, I think that's pretty clear.
I also think like there is like chemistry as part of it too.
Yeah.
Just like with a romantic relationship, it's like
Right.
you can have your checklist for like things you think you want in a partner, but it's like someone may have that, but if you don't have that chemistry, it doesn't really matter. And I think that's something that's hard to define and hard to like sort of seek out necessarily, but you sort of you know it when you find it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
That was a good question, Hannah. That was not on our script. That was a good one. I like that one, because we talk about that a lot, especially like chamber music and like being a good person, especially as students in music school. Like that's a really weird concept for a lot of people to grasp, unfortunately. So that's a good question. But
Well,
speaking,
can I say one more thing about
Yeah.
that? I mean, just, for those listeners that are in college, it's always worth remembering that the people that are around you right now are people that are going to continue to show up in your career, like for the rest of your career. And so part of your reputation starts like immediately, like as soon as you entered music school, you're already developing your reputation through the types of pieces that you play and the people that you work with and how often you're late to rehearsal. Those people are gonna, not all of them, but enough of them are gonna continue to show up in your musical life at summer camps and, once you start getting gigs and jobs and teaching positions. Like John and I, like we're always still drawing on our network of people that we went to school with. So it's really important to sort of know that whether you want to or not, you're already creating your reputation. And so make sure that you're sort of behaving in a way that you want to be remembered 10 years from now.
Preach. That's such solid advice.
It really is. Hannah, what do you think we should do next? Grad school or career? I feel like we're in the career path.
I was going to say, I feel like we're in the career quadrant, so let's just hang out there. We have a question about funding, and whenever we met with John to say hello the other day, he actually gave us some really good advice.
We met with Jeff.
Sorry, we met. John is like, what?
I don't remember this.
Too many J's. Too many J's.
Sorry, when we met with Jeff the other day, he gave us some really good advice on searching for funding and grant opportunities. So how would you advise somebody to go about seeking out those resources?
It's funding is sort of going to be a constant issue that you're going to grapple with as a musician, as a chamber musician, sort of whatever kind of project you're going to be doing. I mean, there's a whole nother podcast you could have just on like how nonprofit arts funding works in the US, right? It's a whole, like getting into tax code and stuff like that. But I think generally, you're going to be looking at either sort of individual contributors, like individual donors or patrons that might want to support a project, or a granting organization, which is basically a collection of individual donors. And that might be sort of like at a state level, that might be at a city level, that might be at your school has some grant funding. And then typically there are also grants for specific groups like females or a certain ethnic background or from a certain hometown or a certain region. There are also grants for that. And there are databases online that you can like just look up grants with different filters and criteria and stuff like that. So that's going to be a big part of it. And then you can also just sort of ask people for money. You know, you can just go find, you know, look in the back of a program and see all the names of people that contributed to a concert and try to find them and ask them, or, you know, so it's, you kind of have to try a lot of different things and see what makes the most sense for your group and sort of your expertise. Like if you're very social and outgoing, then you'd probably do well contacting people directly for, you know, individual contributions. But if that's not, if that sounds like terrifying to you, then look towards grants or, you know, just getting higher paying gigs to pay for projects. I don't know, what would you add to that, John?
I would just say, you know, another model a lot of groups use, and this is kind of what Splinter does, is you do like residencies at schools and things like that, and that's the way you get funding.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's pros and cons to that. You know, you sort of have less freedom to decide what you want to do. Like often what you're doing is, you know, like you're going to school and you're doing pieces by all the composers at that school or something. That sort of
Right,
thing.
which is actually, you know, can be great because you might
Yeah.
not like all six of the pieces, but there might be a couple, like one or two each residency that you get that you'll continue to perform. So if you're looking to just sort of gather repertoire for yourself, then saying, hey, you know, composition department at my former school, can I bring my group in and we'll read all the composition pieces, you know, and often composition departments have more money than like a clarinet department, because they're sort of built around these kinds of opportunities. So that can be a good approach.
And then the other thing is always crowdfunding, of course,
Yeah.
also. You know, I think the only thing with that is that you can't sort of do that all the time. Like I feel like it tends to work better for projects than for sort of ongoing funding. Like, you know, you're making an album or like you're starting up a group for the first season or something like that.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, funding's very difficult, and the person who acts that actually reminds me a little bit of you, John, because she's a composer slash clarinetist who's like just
Oh,
trying to
okay.
find all the money right now. So
Yeah.
it was good to have you talk as well
Well,
because
John, you should
she's
talk about your, sorry to interrupt, you should talk about your bass clarinet piano consortium that you're doing.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So this is a great model for composers, is the consortium model. And so basically what that works is, you know, traditionally with a commission, you have one person or one organization pay a lot of money for a piece. So the idea with a consortium is instead of one person paying, you have a whole lot of people who each pay a little bit of money for the piece. And it's really a win-win because, you know, the composer can often get, you know, especially so the composer can get you know, a decent commissioning fee. The people commissioning don't have to pay a whole lot, so it's much more accessible to a wider range of people. And then also, everyone who's part of the consortium gets to co-premiere the piece effectively, and they all get exclusive performance rights, typically for a year after completion. Which is also great for the composer because it means you get multiple performances of this piece instead of often you get the one performance and then if you're lucky you get a second one 15 years later, right? So I did my first consortium last year. I did a piece for B flat clarinet and piano, and I have one going now for bass clarinet and piano. And I found it to be super fun, a really great way to do it. And I also include, as with like a crowdfunding campaign, I include you know, updates on my composing process. And there's different tiers. You know, if you pay more, then you get a Zoom coaching with me, or you get a hard copy of the piece instead of just digital copy, that sort of thing. So I think that's a great model for composers. I mean, for me personally, I've only tried it so far in the clarinet and bass clarinet world, where I, you know, where I'm somewhat known. If I try to do a, you know, violin solo consortium, I'm not sure how well it would do. So, you know, it's important to kind of know where your audience is and who's likely to be interested.
So were you approached by the consortium, or did people from the consortium come to you and say, John, write us a piece?
So I started it. I initiated the whole thing. So I made a page on my website which says like, here's my idea. I'm going to do this consortium. Here's the different tiers. Here's how much they cost. And then I just, you know, promoted it to all my networks. I post on Facebook. I sent out an email to my people. I sent individual messages to various bass clarinetists who I thought might be interested, or teachers who had students. And yeah, and so that's what I was. I was very nervous going into it because I was like, maybe 2 people will sign up. you know,
You have to
but
write a piece for $100 or something.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, that's really neat, and that's a unique way of like, because for me, I'm currently in my doctorate program, and I was talking to my professors about like, for me, commissioning composers for works. I feel like the scariest thing is investing so much into a piece and not having anyone hear it or play it ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, and actually, often consortiums there's actually a performer who organizes it. So like, so like, let's say, you want to organize a clarinet consortium, you recruit the composer, say, and then you also, because you have the context in the clarinet world, which the composer may not have, then you sort of talk it up and try to get the word out and get other clarinetists on board for it. That's actually a more typical model than the composer starting it themselves. It works for me because I'm also a clarinetist, so I kind of have my feet in both of those worlds.
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That actually makes me think about the next question, because I feel like that's one approach to being a composer, right? But what are other career paths or approaches do people have in regards to clarinet / bass clarinet and also composition, since you're a pretty established composer, John?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. My path has been very roundabout and very winding. So it's hard to kind of present myself as a model for anybody else in a way, because mine it's like a very sort of specific, I have a very, if there's other people out there who are composer, bass clarinetist, music theorists, maybe I have a good tips for you. But I mean, there's the standard paths, which are basically like, get a symphony job or get a teaching job, right? And that's usually what most people have in mind. And those are fine if you can get them. They're very hard to get, and you have to have a sort of very certain kind of skill set and way you like to work and way you like to play or compose to get those kinds of jobs. So mine's been much more kind of all over the place. I remember one time I was doing a presentation. I actually made a list of like every music job I've ever done for money, and it was like so much. I've been a church musician. I've been an engraver for a music publishing company. I've been a critic. I've written reviews. I've played in orchestras. I've played in klezmer bands. I've played in heavy metal bass clarinet quartets. I've worked at music libraries. So, I've kind of just been all over the place. But I guess, for me, what's helped me has been versatility. Sort of, I have my hands in a lot of different things, and I can, my keyboard chops are good enough that I can do a church music director job. My writing skills are good enough that I can, write about music. So I certainly think versatility is always something that's useful, but it's hard for me to give specific advice.
But I
Yeah.
think what you gave is actually realistic, because a lot of people think that the only path that they can do to at least make some income is get a symphony job and get a professor job. And it's like,
Right.
no, you might have to do some things that you didn't think you were gonna do.
Yeah,
So,
you might have to sort of piece a lot of things together. And the other thing is, you also don't have to have a job in music. I think people think that's somehow like failing or selling out or something. But, it's not necessary. Like if you're a composer, you're not necessarily, if you're teaching music theory, that's not necessarily closer to what you're doing as a composer than if you're doing computer coding or something, So what I try to tell students sometimes is, there's basically 2 different problems you have to solve. One is, how are you going to make the art you want to make? The other is, how are you going to make a living, right? And those may or may not intersect in various ways. If you can make all of your money from doing the art you want to do, that's fantastic. But especially for composers, that's pretty rare. So, so basically think of them as separate problems that you have to solve, that they don't have to link up.
This will definitely be a topic we talk about at the bass clarinet camp, by the way. This is like one whole and I have a whole chart of like all of the music. I can share it. It's in my link tree, or I can share it with you guys, of like all the jobs in music that I could find. And there's hundreds of jobs in music. And it's like John said, you just decide how much does your art need to be tied up with your financial security. And for some people, it should be completely one and the same, but for some people, it should be completely separate. And it's not, one isn't better than the other. It just means that one person has different skills than the other person, or different interests. For me, I've always had a lot of interests, and it's been sort of how can I bring those into my clarinet playing, or sort of attach them to my clarinet playing. And even my position at SFCM is part clarinet teaching, part chamber music, part professional development, part technology, part curation, part chair. It's like a lot of different things that I do there. And I feel very lucky that I was able to sort of create a position there over time that sort of like fit all of my different interests. But I think if I hadn't been able to do that, I would just be doing all of those things independently, just under different umbrellas instead of all at one place. So yeah, it's really about sort of knowing yourself, knowing what you want to do and what you want to achieve, and finding something that you can do that other people can't do, and sort of finding a way to sort of get that out into the world.
I think that's so refreshing and so liberating to hear like two like grown up established professionals say that your music does not have to equal your living. Like John and Jeff are both saying, like those can be two separate things, and you're not a failure if playing the clarinet professionally does not make you your bread and butter. Like you can have multiple things going on, and maybe it's even better if you do. So
Yeah.
kind of going off of that, what are some non-musical things that you do with your life, maybe in addition to your actual jobs, or just hobby wise, and how do they impact your musicianship?
Ooh. I love to read sci-fi and fantasy books. I read between like 75 and 100 in a year.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
Re-record that because all of our faces went.
So that's like how I unwind, or like in commutes, things like that. So that's like a big interest of mine. And then I'm a sort of a helpless dabbler. Like I practiced Aikido, the martial art, for several years, and that taught me a lot about like body awareness and like sort of energy projection. Recently, like during the pandemic, I got into archery. That was sort of my pandemic hobby. And yeah, I really like trying new things just because I actually like being a beginner. Like I like being bad, and sort of that initial sort of like, I'm so bad at this, but I know how to learn. And so then I can sort of get like pretty good pretty quickly. And it's kind of fun for me to sort of also see like what are beginners taught in other fields besides music, and like what is the sort of like approach to learning from like an archery perspective, or Aikido, or like whatever it is that you're doing. Like I find that I always learn something from teachers in completely different fields, or if it's anything related to like body or mind or wellness or anything like that, there's always something that then I can be like, oh, that I can use that in my music or my performance or whatever. So that's kind of my approach to that. I think hobbies are really, really important. Yeah, they don't have to be as sort of like esoteric or wholesome. It could also, like video games, I think would qualify if you approach them correctly.
What about you, John?
Yeah, I think I have a lot fewer hobbies than Jeff. I mean, I think partly because I do so many different things in music. Sometimes I feel like that, like sometimes there's not like a clear line between work and hobby for me in some ways. But I do also, I really love, I'm really fascinated by cities. I love like exploring cities. I lived in London for 4 years, and like my favorite thing to do on a weekend would just be to wander around the city for like 12 hours. I think if I weren't a musician, I might be like an urban planner or architect or something. So that's something I really enjoy, and I read a fair amount. I tend to read more kind of history, social history, politics, that kind of stuff. And that also sort of definitely works its way into my composing work sometimes. Just sort of thinking about what's going on in the world. And
so in conclusion, everybody listening, get out of a practice room.
Oh yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. No, one of the most important parts of composing for me is going for walks. And I think that's something I didn't really appreciate until fairly recently. Just, instead of bang your head against your blank sheet of manuscript paper or listening to your MIDI playback for the 18th time, tweaking some tiny little things, go for a walk and think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can I say generally, I don't know if this is going to come up as a question, but everyone is practicing, I was going to say wrong, but I mean to say inefficiently. uh, um, that's like maybe like a whole separate topic again, and we'll talk about it in the camp. But I think there's, a lot of times I certainly was under the impression that like if I just spend more time in the practice room, then that is always better, and that's not really the case. Like it's about being really strategic and smart with the time that you have, and doing less practicing of a higher quality is going to get you much better results than just like, well, I was in the practice room for 6 hours today. Did I get better? It's like, no, you definitely didn't improve after the first hour. So there's a lot, and there's a lot of sort of like research and like science and around like effective practice that's coming out, which is really interesting and definitely worth checking out. This is the things that I wish I had known like 20 years ago.
Yeah. Do we have a whole topic on this, Hannah? A whole podcast? Yeah.
Venn pod,
I was like, I don't remember if it
great.
was an episode or if it was a topic we brought up, because we're firm believers that like what you do outside of a practice room strongly influences what goes on in a practice room. And we're also big advocates for, what is it? Quality over quantity. The
Yes.
cues. Because even we have been victims of the whole, if you're not practicing 6 hours a day, you're not a good musician. And we're like crying. We're like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm gonna go to practice from now. And then we get injured, and then nothing good comes out of anything at that point. So we talk about that a lot on our podcast. So
Yeah, because bad practice is worse than no practice, right? Because if you're
Yeah.
reinforcing bad habits, that's worse than doing nothing.
Yeah,
Yep.
practicing when you're stressed or tired, your body remembers that and then tries to recreate that stress or fatigue when you're in a performance. So then you're like, oh, cool.
that needs to be on like t-shirts, mugs, stickers. Get it out at every big
merch,
clarinet
SQWONK
conference
merch.
from now on. Bad practice is worse than no practice. That's
Yeah.
so true, and we forget it so often.
Yeah.
Something that we have a whole topic on grad school right now, but I think this kind of ties into all of this because, in my opinion, I feel like there's different approaches to practicing, right? And teaching as well. And some teachers like strongly encourage you to like get some rest, to eat some food. And other teachers may be like, you need to get in a practice room for longer. So, like, in terms of grad school or even undergrad, like, what are some things that people should be looking for when applying to different institutions or trying to study with different professors? Like, do you guys have any tips, advice?
Um, I mean, I feel like I'm keep coming back to this, but I think it's really dependent on each specific person to find the place that's right for them. And I think you need to know about yourself. Really, do you do better when you're a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond? And like you should know about that about yourself. Certainly when you go out of college, and maybe when you're exiting high school, you should know like, how am I going to really do if I'm the worst person in the studio, or would I do better if I'm the best person in the studio, or somewhere in the middle. Um, and I think there's a lot of like peer pressure and sort of like reputation pressure where you sort of feel like, but if I don't get into this school, or if I'm not in New York or something, then like I should just kind of give up right now. And this kind of ties into this career stuff we were saying, where it's not about what other people are doing, it's about what you're doing and what you want to do with music. And you may know, I want to be an orchestral musician, and I know that, and I love it, and I dream it, and I breathe it, and the scores are my pillow. So then, like, yeah, you should go to a school with a teacher that can help you with that specific kind of training. Or maybe you want to do contemporary music or bass clarinet, then like find that kind of a teacher. But if you don't know yet, then you should find a teacher who's open-minded and willing to work with you and sort of bring out of you what you have to offer the world of music. And so you just
In
want
other words, you should study with Jeff.
I was gonna say that he was like contemporary bass clarinet. I'm like,
I mean, I am biased at SFCM. I feel like we have a unique because we do have symphony musicians and we do have contemporary. We have like a really wide variety of offerings for our faculty, and so you can kind of do whatever while you're there. But I think just generally, it's important to make sure that your teacher is going to like nurture you and not just sort of like give you a book of things to work on. And I once heard from a teacher, I won't say who or where, like, well, my job is just to make sure they're better at the end of the lesson than they were at the beginning. It's like, that's like okay, but like, is that enough? And is that like where you want to spend 4 years where your teacher is like, that's all they're doing? Is just like, well, they come in and then I just improve them a little bit and then they go and I don't really think about it after that. Like, you'll get a lot out of that, but not as much as someone who's really like looking at who you are and what you want to achieve and what you want to accomplish and like where you fit in and what your level is when you enter. And I think it's just, you want to find someone who's going to look at you as a holistic individual. And I think there are a lot of places that you can do that, and it's not necessarily in like the most prestigious named schools, you know what I mean? Some of the teachers there do that, but not all of them. And so it's just really like, I think, important to find the right person.
And also that, someone who's a fantastic player, that doesn't necessarily translate to being a good teacher, and vice versa, right? Teaching is a different skill,
Yeah.
right? Certainly you would expect that someone who's a good clarinet teacher is also at least a good player. But sometimes, the very best players, everything comes so naturally to them that they actually don't really know how to teach it, And I also think,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, maybe if there's someone who is a great player, not a great teacher, but you don't really need a great teacher because you're already sort of really developed because of where you went to high school,
Yeah.
where you did your undergrad, then just having an hour a week with like the principal clarinetist from wherever, that might be enough for you. And that might be actually
Yeah.
fit because you just need that final bit of like polishing or training to get you to be where you are. And I want someone who's like on the ground doing the job that I want to tell me how to get there.
Yeah, that's true.
And so then that's perfect. That's a perfect fit for you. But if you don't know yet what you want to be doing and you're not really sure, then that teacher, it's, can give you a lot, but might not give you exactly what you need. And there might be a better teacher elsewhere that can do that for you. And so I think finding a school that just matches what you want to do with music is the important thing.
And I think understanding your own learning style is important too. Like, do you need a teacher who will like really kick your butt, like hold you accountable? I think some people, that's exactly what they need. Some people, what they need is someone who's much more kind of loose and allows you to be much more self-motivated. And if you get that match wrong, I think that can be really hard and really detrimental for you.
Yeah. I would say for myself, I definitely went with the picking the teacher rather than the school name. And a lot of people looked at me like, why did you apply to so-and-so school? I'm like, because that's not really what I wanted. And for me, it kind of like became a whole explaining situation because a lot of people still don't realize like what I want and what I need is actually valid too. Because a lot of people in our society, especially in the music world, are still caught up in the name situation.
Yeah.
So like, and then they forget also the important part, which is not all performers are good teachers, which is kind of scary. So that's a big factor in my opinion that I bring up a lot to people who ask me for advice at least.
Yeah.
And just one more important thing I think is that, school is just the beginning. Like, I feel like the most important things I've learned have happened since I finished school. So it's also like, it's not sort of, I mean, it's an important choice to make, but it's also not sort of the final decision that's going to sort of determine your whole career. Like there's opportunities to reset and you never know, you'll probably change during school too. And what you wanted going into it may be very different from what you want once you finish.
Let's say, for example, you went to a school and they don't have a great bass clarinet teacher. Well, you should just come to the SFCM Bass Clarinet Intensive June 12th through 16th. All your problems will be solved.
That was a good plug, not gonna lie. We'll just put that in the front. That was a really good plug. But that actually speaks as to why sometimes these summer intensives are important. Like, even if you're not a bass clarinetist, right? It's like coming to see what it's like to learn from you, what it's like to learn from John, or if you talk about other camps and stuff like that. Like, I learned that I liked learning from X person because of this camp, right? So attending these summer festivals, intensives, camps, they're important. So
Yeah. It also helps calibrate because you know where you are sort of within your own school, but then going
mhm.
somewhere else and being like, oh, wow, okay, this is what other people are working on, and this is sort of like where I fit in the pack there. It's good information to have because you can get really fixated on like, well, that's the superstar in my studio, but it's like, oh no, it all gets mixed up when you start going traveling around and meeting new people.
And I think we also hope that, people will make connections and form friendships and musical collaborations and stuff through this. Because, often people who are really into bass clarinet, there may not be many or any other bass clarinet fanatics wherever they're in school. So this could also be a great opportunity just to, meet other colleagues and potential friends and collaborators.
Yeah.
So the moral of this Venn pod has been be a good person,
Mhm.
make friends and make music with other good people.
Mhm.
You will survive if you don't pick the name brand school. Get out of your practice room and go to San Francisco Conservatory of Music bass clarinet camp.
You
Drop
got
it
it.
again.
That's right.
Drop the dates again, Jeff.
It's June 12th through 16th. Applications are due April 1st. Very welcoming. We hope you all can come check it out.
Awesome. This has been the Venn Pod. Thank you again, John and Jeff, so much for joining us. And you should know that we sign off every Venn Pod by doing our logo, which is the Venn diagram.
Do y'all have a logo? So we're
Bring it
gonna do
towards
this.
the camera.
It's Squonk.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know how to do our
Let
little
the
dinosaur.
yours. We'll do
Right?
yours.
Let the
Yeah.
Squonk does their little emblem and we do the Venn one.
Okay, everybody throw up your Venn diagrams.
But
Bam.